Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another lesson. As promised in this lesson, we are going to make a script that will spawn a pin whenever we tap the screen. And we are going to be using the instantiate function as we did in the last game that we made. I think there's no need to explain it again, however, I will briefly remind you how to use the instantiate function. First, let's create a new script. We can call it pin spawner. Open it up in Visual Studio, and we can get rid of the start method. To check whether the screen was tapped until now, we have been using the onMouseDown method. However, this time we are going to be using something else. And I believe we have used it only once before in the color switch game, but I'm going to explain it over again. So the update method is executed every frame. And this is where we want to check whether our screen was tapped, because it can be tapped at any moment. So we will be using an if statement inside of the update method. We are going to check for the input. Input.get mouse button down will check whether the input that was received by the game is a mouse button. And to specify which mouse button, we need to type a number into the brackets. The left mouse button, or a touch on the touchscreen with the finger, is represented by a 0. So if the input is the left mouse button, we want to do something. And the difference between checking for a tap in this way and in this way is that if we are using the onMouseDown method, we also need to use a clickable collider. If you remember correctly, our buttons wouldn't work unless we added the collider to it when using this method. In this case, we don't need to use a collider at all, so wherever we tap on the screen, it will execute the code. So let's delete this method. In order to clone a prefab or to instantiate it, we will need a few variables first. We are going to have a public game object variable that's going to be our prefab, so we can call it pin prefab. And the other public variable that we need is also going to be a game object, however that's going to be the empty game object that will represent the spawn location, if you remember, so we can simply call it location. We still haven't created this game object, so let's go back to Unity and do that. Right click in the hierarchy tab and choose create empty. We can name it pin location and set it to wherever you want the pin to spawn. I will say right around here. Now that we have all of these necessary variables to spawn our pin prefab, let's use the instantiate function. If you don't remember, the first parameter in the brackets is going to be the object that we want to clone, and that's the pin prefab. And after that we want the position and rotation of where we want to spawn it. So that's going to be location.transform.position, and after that is going to be location.transform.rotation. And that should be it. Make sure you save this, then go back to Unity, and we are going to attach this script to our main camera, because it's always there. Take the pin spawner script and attach it to the camera. Now we can see that we are still missing the prefab and the location. The prefab is right here, and the location is the empty game object that we just created. If we click play, on the tap of a screen, we should be getting the pins spawned. Everything functions properly, however this is a game that requires coordination, so it's kinda weird that the pins spawn out of nowhere, and I think that we should have an indicator of where the pins should spawn. The easiest way to do that is to find our pin sprite, add it into the scene, and remember to reduce the size to 0.6 And after that, simply drag it to the same position as our empty game object. So it's minus 3.3 on the y-axis. And what we could do is to make it a little bit out of color. So click on the color attribute in the sprites renderer and reduce the alpha to about 95. And that's kind of what it looks like in the original game. So when we tap the screen now, the pin should appear at the exact same location as this. In the next lesson, we are going to make the score in the middle of the target, and we are also going to complete the game over scene so that it displays the score there as well. We are going to be using the player prefs for that, and as you might have guessed, we will also have a high score system. So stay tuned.